Jason Rzucidlo reporting inside the San Marino Club in Troy for the SAE Detroit section State of the Industry meeting. Stay tuned for remarks from Mr. Jason Stein, editor of Automotive News.
I think that the mood in the hallways and at the table is noticeably better than it even was last year. I think that, God forbid, 2009. I think we've officially driven a stake through 2009. I think we can now sleep better. Who in the room can sleep better now than they could in 2009? That was so last decade, wasn't it? That was even before the term Sergio was a household name. And by the way, not the same household word that's being used in Italy right now about him, especially after he threatened to move headquarters to America. You realize that he even managed to push Berlusconi and the prostitutes off the front page last week. Amazing what the man can do. He can move mountains. Okay, 2011, 11 trends for 11. These are not all the trends, obviously, but they're the trends that we're watching closely as we move into this period of the next normal, which is the phrase that's been overused so many times, I'll use it again. So the new Detroit, it ain't this. Seen one of these lately? There's the sticker, out of it, you see it right there. Out of a job, keep buying foreign. Which, by the way, was developed by an oh-so-foreign Daimler, that vehicle, and it is now run by this man. Speaking of Sergio, why is this man smiling? Well, out of a job yet, better buy foreign, and you'll help this dealership of the future. What is foreign in Detroit anymore? The new Chrysler, or maybe just Sergio, as it could come to be known, whatever it will be called, when it sets up global headquarters here, is a very integrated operation with plans to reshape both its product lineup with Fiat platforms, accounting for 60% of future Chrysler vehicles. Out of a job yet, keep buying foreign. Chrysler's grand plan includes using the best from Fiat. And having spent some time in Europe, there's some pretty good stuff that they can use in this market, especially as gas prices continue to rise. But it's a cigarette-smoking, Canadian sweater-wearing guy who's leading this charge. 30 pounds thinner, and I think most would agree in this room, doing a remarkable job. Mike Jackson recently at the NADA conference in San Francisco proclaimed this man a hero with what he has been able to do. He's leveraging global synergies for growth, platform development, and mostly making decisions that Chrysler people care about, driven mostly by Chrysler people inside headquarters in Auburn Hills. With Cerberus, I think it was safe to say the cupboard was bare. At least you have someone who's now going to the grocery store. So in the new Detroit, Chrysler has hoarded cash, saved some money, made some money, reskinning products, and even making M&M into a pretty wealthy guy. But more on him in a second. I'll get to that in a second. So out of a job yet, keep buying foreign. Well, is this vehicle or this concept, is that foreign? Is this car company foreign? In the new Detroit, companies like Ford are getting a lot smarter about what they do overseas, using global platforms and importing stuff that's actually pretty cool. It's really well done, and it works. The Fiesta, Focus, S-Max are all products that make sense, especially as gas prices continue to climb. But your overly friendly airport screener has probably touched more North Americans than this car saw during development. Based off a European platform, engineered, designed, created, crafted, good old Cologne. So, the new Detroit, how about revenue, profits, and smiling faces? Some have been helped by not being part of the mess. Ford continues to churn out great results. And some have grand plans that really we're only starting to see right now. And who would have predicted this? A year ago, sitting in the room, the GM would be listed on the stock exchange, have another CEO, another marketing boss, another head of Chevy, and another shot, to say the least. Another amazing story. Trend 2. The real end of push? At our World Congress in Detroit in January, Mike Jackson, CEO of AutoNation, talked about the end of push. That system that was perfected over many years by many Detroit car companies that basically had vehicles produced for one reason: keep the factories moving. The old incentive was car companies had to build as many cars as possible, so to reduce the average cost per car. And these factors played a major role in Detroit's addiction to discounts. We'll talk about discounts and incentives a little bit later as a trend to watch. But the end result was what no business person would really want, a low profit margin business that is vulnerable to any slackening in consumer demand, which is exactly what's happening. It's a terrible cycle. Produce more cars, keep the factories going, discount the cars, wash, rinse, repeat. It all happened. And when GM and Chrysler stopped production in '09, it was a turning point in the industry. Okay, the elephant in the room. Anyone know this little guy? Talk about a small part that sent a global giant careening. The stop production, which was about a year ago if you remember correctly, the recall of millions of vehicles was a unqualified PR nightmare and sent a musical to Minnesota, which was produced on the stage in Minneapolis. Toyota, the runaway musical hit. Toyota went to the incentives, they went to price cuts, they went to warranties in order to get back into business. And it had a pretty devastating effect on the brand. The latest franchise data from J.D. Power last week in San Francisco showed that Toyota still has a lot of work to do. Their IQS scores are below average, their appeal is lower than it has been. 17% of consumers said they were actively avoiding the brand, which was up from basically nothing. Dealer profitability is still good, but way down from the good old days. And conquest rates are also challenged. So it's a slippery slope and proof, I think, that quality is really all that matters. One funny note about Toyota. There was a lot of good news, you could say, last week when the government came out with their ruling stating that NASA had figured out that the gremlins were not to blame for the sudden acceleration. There was a lot of rejoicing when the government announced its decision, and I thought, how ironic, believing what the government tells you. This is a new standard in the industry. Trend 4, marketing's back. Chances are if you nodded off during the Super Bowl and woke up again, you probably saw a car commercial. There were about a dozen of them, and marketing's back in a big way. Chevy is indeed running deep in all forms of advertising as a way to push bankruptcy to that rearview mirror. Joel Uwanek, as the marketing VP, is putting a lot of energy into this effort and has done a fine job. Probably means you're not going to see a CEO walking the factory floor anymore, or mentioning the GM word, because it's all about the brands. But you will see more of this guy and more Chryslers in the future, which is part of the marketing trend that also is continuing. Chrysler, and by the way, how many thought this ad worked? It worked very well. 5 million YouTube videos in climbing, shirts that were printed, imported from Detroit, slogans, and people actually selling cars. We talked to a guy who sold a 200 last week after not selling any Sebrings last year. We'll see. He sold one. But Marchione has people talking about product again. He's got the right team built around him. And he stayed dark during the dark times, which was the right thing to do. But now he has some things to talk about. Trend 5, credit is also back. Or as Mike Jackson says, normalized credit. Notice how Mike Jackson's kind of become the Bob Lutz of the new industry. He's kind of the spokesperson for all of this. Well, he makes a lot of sense. He says that it's normalized credit. It's not that it's looser, it's that it's back. And dealers can get credit. Suppliers are starting to get a little bit more credit. Consumers can buy cars. Small suppliers are still having a hard time ramping up. And a lot of that has to do with other issues related to bottlenecks, which brings us to trend 6, supplier survivors and bottlenecks. Some major suppliers survived during the downturn. Some cut way back, and now some are ramping up as production forecasts increase. There are still bottlenecks everywhere. There are raw material bottlenecks. There is the need to crank up to higher levels, and frankly, car companies can't get the kind of products that they really want at this point. The old world with suppliers was they frankly couldn't wait for 2009 to end. The new world now with suppliers is they're pretty much happier than ever.